This session is about AI is rapidly moving beyond chat windows and into the devices we already live with. Our mobile phones, wearables, cars, and homes. And with that shift, the question is changing. Not just what AI can do, but how it should show up in our everyday lives. For an inside look, please welcome to the stage our spectacular moderator, Kamal Ahmed, and Will Abbey, Executive Vice President and Chief Commercial Officer at the much-hyped ARM. Enjoy!
Thank you, Baz. Welcome, Will, to South by.
Thank you.
Will, I have been to South by before. Luckily, that was in Austin, Texas, where
Yes.
the sun always shone.
That's right.
And it was beautifully warm, so welcome to London. But you actually grew up in Manchester, so you will know that the weather is not always tip-top perfect in the UK.
Yeah, I actually grew up in Ghana. So it's a bit like Austin. I'm used to all-day sunshine.
Yes.
Yes, and you're right. And then I moved
And
from
then
Ghana
came here,
to...
grew up in Manchester.
That's right, to Manchester.
Welcome everyone to South by. Thank you so much for coming to this session. I have been a business journalist for many decades. I'm twice the age of most people in this room, but ARM has been a particular passion of mine because it is not that rare thing, but that good thing, an original British success story. But before we get to that,
Okay.
Will, I think it's always nice to have a little bit of the origin story, the journey. Now, we know that our origin stories are a little bit whiskery and a bit old now, to be honest, with this great audience. But nevertheless, Will, Ghana, Manchester, global, just give us a little bit of who is Will Abbey?
Good morning again. So I grew up in Ghana. And from those early days growing up in Ghana, I had this fascination of... we had a television for the first time when I was 7 years of age, and I was looking at this television, kind of working out how does this thing come to life and what is it all about. So I've always been intrigued in technology from a young man. My parents decided to emigrate from Ghana to that sunny place in the north of England, Manchester. I studied in Sheffield. I studied electronic systems and control engineering. Had a few jobs in the UK and in Europe, and then had the opportunity to move across to work for ARM in sunny California. I've been there for the last 16 years. A blend of a technologist and a commercial thinking individual, and that lends itself really well for the job that I do. I love tech, but at the same time, tech has to be meaningful, has to make an impact in people's lives, and commercially, it needs to be able to allow the company to get the headroom to be able to grow. So that's me in a short sort of 2 or 3 minutes.
Very good to hear. I'm going to drill down a little bit on,
Okay.
We've both got children of similar ages, which I think will be an interesting part of our conversation we're going to have together. We've got half an hour together now, which will be brilliant. But you're in a market which the other names in your market are probably, well, definitely more recognizable than ARM. If you think of Intel, NVIDIA, IBM, AMD, so many of the big players in technology. But talk us through what ARM actually does, because ARM is actually the foundational tech layer for so much of the work that is done in technology.
Yeah, I mean, our origin story is the UK. We're a UK company. Head office is in Cambridge, and I think you're not giving the audience the credit that they deserve. I think many people know who ARM is, but you're right, that's not always been the case. And so whether it's NVIDIA, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's AWS, all of the amazing products that they build cannot come to life without the foundational or the fundamental element, which is compute, which is CPUs. And so if you think about any kind of digital system today, whether it's a smartwatch, a smart home, a smart car, the thing that makes it smart is the central processing unit. It's the thing that thinks. And so the thing that thinks, being the CPU, being the brain, that's what ARM fundamentally does. So we create central processing units. But we also have a foundation that allows companies to build amazing products. So if you think about products that need to be power efficient, that needs to be high performant, and needs to be cost effective. None of those products could ever exist if ARM was not there with that foundational platform that we create. And just to put things into context, every mobile phone, and some of you guys are recording this, every mobile phone would not be possible without the central processing unit that ARM enables, ARM creates, and ARM allows those product companies to build products around ARM. And so CPUs that are in mobile devices like phones, CPUs that are in laptops and PCs, data centers that essentially allow compute to take place, the infrastructure that moves data around, all of those devices could not exist without the enabling foundational platform that ARM creates. And so we just celebrated the fact that cumulatively, since the beginning of time when ARM was sort of born in 1997 to where we are today, we have shipped, believe it or not, almost 350 billion devices. Every 3 months, we ship something close to 16, 17 billion devices. And I think all Brits should know ARM and should be comfortable with ARM because we are a UK success story.
Now, Will, you went to America.
Yes.
From a UK to find success in your skill set. Would you still need to do that today, do you think? There's always a worry, isn't there, on this side of the Atlantic? And I'm not just talking about the UK, but I'm talking about Europe as a whole. That if you really want to grow, if you really want to be successful, get yourself over to California, or get yourself over maybe to India, or get yourself operationalized in China. Don't do it here in Europe because we're a little risk averse, we're a little bit regulation first. We don't really have the scalability possibilities because of lack of cross-border cooperation or flat playing field, even playing field. Would the Will of today, at the same age, still think, I better go to California?
Well, look, I think it's a great question. And you described me as being successful, and perhaps I am to some extent. But the key to any success is great advisors. And so it wasn't my idea. I didn't wake up one day and said, I need to go to California. Perhaps being in Manchester, the idea of California was attractive from that perspective. But I went to California specifically because a mentor said to me that if you're serious about developing your craft, then the opportunity to network, the opportunity to see technology close up and personal is a great place to be, is California, Silicon Valley. But I don't think that advice is an advice I would give to anyone in the audience today, unless you clearly want to go to California because you want the sunshine. But what makes California unique is the ecosystems. And so, Microsoft, AWS, ARM, all the technology companies are there. All the infrastructure, software, tools, everything is there to allow you to quickly learn your craft, make mistakes, and develop your own sort of persona around what you need to do. But the reason I don't think that's relevant now, I think that Europe has matured considerably since I left in 2012, 2013. ARM has 39 offices. We have 3 now in the UK. And the reason we do that is because talent exists. But beyond ARM and being relevant in Bristol, Cambridge, and the UK, but it's these, I'd say, microcosms or these ecosystems that are being built now in the UK, in Europe, whether it's Eindhoven, whether it's Paris, whether it's Germany, whether it's the UK, where you don't necessarily need to move to California, or some may say perhaps China's a place. I don't think we need to do that. I think you can stay here. I think those ecosystems of talent already exist, and that from software to hardware to even the machines that are necessary to produce chips, all of that exists now within Europe. And so I'd say to my younger self, perhaps just stay in the UK. Perhaps stay in Europe. Everything's here.
Let's talk about, the session is called AI Left the Chat. So we are in a situation where very, very quickly we have become used as consumers to the idea of now prompting AI administrators to help us do our tasks every day. And that's a prompt function. Yeah. Of course, with agentic AI and embedded AI, it starts working in an ambient way within the systems you give it access to, whether that's as an enterprise application or personal applications. Talk us through how you see that transition between AI that you prompt and it gives you options which you then see and make decisions on, and AI that is in the system working agentically on the data and the behaviors that you give it access to.
Yeah, Kamal, you've covered a lot, and I think if we had time, we should unpack the definition of some of the things that you've just said. But I mean, so I think first and foremost, I think all of us today now, whether we recognize it or not, are using AI systems, right? So when you look at the phone in your hand, and I can see a phone that's probably staring at me, right? So there's a bunch of AI embedded in that phone, in those phones, where you don't typically have to prompt, right? So a good example of that is the face unlock. It's a security features in a phone. You don't need to ask for it to turn on. You look at your screen, in the background, on-device AI is functioning. You take a picture, and I'm not very good at taking pictures, as my kids tell me, Dad, you're not holding it right, and all of those things. But even a poor picture that I take, image enhancement capabilities that are embedded in the phone will do that for you. When you walk into your kitchen of today and you shout, Alexa, that's AI at its best in a way that's non-intrusive. But I think the bigger question is, from an AI system that I typically, whether it's ChatGPT, it's Gemini, you call it what you want, where you're typically asking it to perform a function, to where the industry is going, where I think AI at its best, it's when it is less mechanical, it's more at a point of need. It's not intrusive. We have spent many, many years as a technology, as an industry, building tech that we need, that basically demands our attention, right? And so I use 2 mobile phones, believe it or not, one for personal use, one for work. But those things can be intrusive. I think the opportunity that on-device AI or agentic systems will create when they are working right is it will augment, it won't demand your attention, it will work with you in a non-intrusive way. And I think that's the promise that on-device AI promises.
Now, we were talking in the green room just before we came on stage about some examples that are already, you were talking about a trip to China, you'd missed a flight. Yeah. Just tell us how give us very personal examples of how that can actually be an augmentation of where we are and get through some of the great frustrations we always have every day in the way we operate.
Yeah, and I think, look, the big promise that AI has to offer is around, I think, medicine, right? It's solving problems that humans today are struggling to solve. But let's put that to one side. I travel a fair bit, and typically when I'm not in a country where English is the first language, I'm normally there with an individual that can kind of help me navigate stuff, and it works typically fine. But when the example that I was sharing with Kamal is about a year and a half ago, I was in Shanghai, and my person that was helping me navigate stuff drops me off at the airport and assumes that everything's going to go perfectly well. Flight was delayed. I had to then find a hotel for the night, and so I'm trying to get a taxi, and my Mandarin is extremely poor. I can just say hello and goodbye, and that's about it. And so trying to navigate my way around Shanghai, speaking to a taxi driver who doesn't speak English, it was near impossible. If I do that same trip today, I simply just get out my phone. I speak in English. The phone then does the rest. And so every time I've used it, the drivers are typically a little bit surprised because my Mandarin obviously is then pitch perfect. He speaks Mandarin back. So, AI systems can make a fundamental difference, can make our lives easier, and that's just one example. But I think the promise for all of us is medicine, right? It's some of those hard areas, some of those hard problems that perhaps by ourselves we can't do.
I was at the book launch for the book, the biography of Demis Hassabis, And Demis was speaking about those huge challenges. I think you're right. Sometimes in the media world, we can become obsessed with some of the fear stuff, which I think is important, and we're going to touch on that. But also we can slightly talk about those really useful, but not absolutely game-changing on a macro level types of uses that you discuss. And Demis talks about solving disease within the next decade. And he says the next challenge for DeepMind, based here in London, is to solve for climate and sustainability. And that does open up the huge opportunities we now have with these abilities that agentic AI systems can give us to allow us to think in ways, or to help us think in ways that weren't possible. Protein folding, for example, incredibly difficult job to do. That must be where a lot of our conversation needs to move to, but then also, who's in charge of that journey? Is it down to amazing brains of DeepMind? But of course, that needs to be with governments and all of us as democratic citizens.
Yeah, the tech has to evolve. And so let's just go back to sort of talking a bit more about other examples, and then we can come back to this. So, I mean, autonomous driving, for example, is not possible without the tech coming together and making a difference, right? So this idea of in the moment, instantaneously being able to look at objects in the road, all of those things are great examples of AI, autonomous systems working today. But coming fast forward to the question that you're asking, I do believe that there is still room for improvement, and in order to get where we need to get to from where we are today, the tech has to come together, right? And so it's not one single company that's going to solve the problem. Yes, ARM is a foundational capability that needs to be there at the basics to allow those things to happen. But CPUs, GPUs, systems, software, all of that needs to come together. And the thing that we also need to be very, very mindful of is a conversation that's taking place around power, right? And so performance per watt, the idea that it's not all about having systems that are power hungry, but you need to have systems that are mindful of the fact that power is a scarce commodity. And that's one of the things that ARM, I believe, does well. We're performant, but we're also power efficient. And so in order
that was part of your big sell. Part of ARM's huge sell was the fact that your brilliant inventions didn't use much power. That was the reason they were adopted so rapidly.
Absolutely.
That's why they work in our mobile. This is tiny.
That's right. But the same idea that powers the same performance in a phone that needs to be power efficient in a phone. If you think about the fact that in those early days, those lithium batteries in those Nokia big brick phones couldn't last more than a couple of hours, right? And when ARM came on the scene, it was moving from a couple of hours to a couple of days. That same sensibility around power efficiency is what allows PCs now not to be plugged to the wall, that allows data centers not to drag too much power away from the grid. And so that power efficient architecture is that's what's allowed ARM to scale from mobile devices to PCs to data centers and to cloud AI systems, right? And it's still the bread and butter of what we do, power efficient systems.
So efficiency is vitally important, but demand is growing exponentially. Yeah. So even though our ability per unit is becoming better, the overall demand is very worrying for many people. These data centers in positions where are they actually degrading the amount of power being delivered to local communities, as basic as that? Just talk us through the data center evolution. Everyone is building like crazy. Some of the big players have warned that we're building capabilities for things we may never need. Yeah. Could we see in 5 years' time 1,000 white elephant data centers because we simply haven't had this incredibly aggressive journey towards AI adoption, which a lot of the tech firms are saying we will have?
Yeah, look, I mean, we're all global citizens, and I, for one, don't want to see a world where lights cannot be turned on in homes and schools, right? And so the industry needs to come together, and the industry is coming together. If you think about models, right, these large language models, there is a drive to ensure that these models are super efficient, whether it's models that are running in the cloud, but more often, the idea of smaller, lightweight models that are on device is sort of pervasive right now. And so this power-efficient story, which is the ARM origin story, needs to be pervasive across the whole value chain as we think about building data centers. And the reason why we're building data centers is that to get to this agentic world, right, this idea of systems that think for themselves, that these agents that can help you and I plan a trip from here to California, the amount of compute that's required is enormous. And so if we're not working together, if we're not thinking deeply around power being a scarce resource and using that power in a sensible way, things will get out of control. But the industry is responsible, and the industry is working together, and the industry is listening to the ARM ethos of power efficiency.
And I think that's where the ecology of not just the big players, but the ecology of all the people that feed ideas into you, the entrepreneurs, that ecology I think is really important in that sort of efficiency, power, safety, the guardrails. That whole area is a fascinating place now to sort of play in, because you partner down as well as you partner up. Seems to be an important part of how that ecology grows. Now, so Tony Blair, former Prime Minister of the UK, of course, wrote this major essay last week where he described the technological revolution we're going through today as important and consequential as the industrial revolution of over a century ago. And many people point out that, of course, the industrial revolution brought us astonishing progress. Health, wealth, invention, power. You can go on and on and on. It also brought us poverty and slums. How do we consider that we don't create a new digital divide which leaves us with those winners and losers that were so clear and led to so much, in the end, democratic reform in terms of the rights for people in revolution situations? How do we protect ourselves from getting into that this time around, given that we know our history?
Yeah, look, I mean, we've got to put things into context a little bit, right? The net result of the Industrial Revolution is a positive outcome, but I do recognize that there are always winners and losers. And so when you think about where technology is going, and this idea of regionality, I think that's the point that you're making. Is it globally, or are you thinking more around how does we, as in from a European perspective?
What's the right level for those types of debates? There's obviously been a huge challenge in the past 10 years, bit more than that probably, to what's described as the global rules-based order. We are now much more in a multipolar world where you're going to need some regionalization around those controls, whether that's Asia, India, Europe, UK, America. Does that mean that you have sort of fractured ways of operating in this world, and there will be some areas where there'll be very different rule books and ways of thinking? As you say, you're a global citizen, not everyone is. Most people who probably are born in Manchester may well die in Manchester. It's just I'm optimistic, like you, net optimistic about this amazing period we're living in, but also aware of the downside risk. And I'm just wondering what you believe for ARM and others in your sector, the responsibilities and how you can think about that modeling.
Yeah, so look, I mean, firstly, access to technology is not equal, right? I recognize that, especially being born in Ghana, right? And so I still see Africa is a continent that I call home, and I'm proud that I am a Ghanaian, I'm proud that I am an African. But one of the things that keeps me at ARM is some of the things that we do when we think about making access to technology fair, right? And so we do have, sort of business model accesses that allow entrepreneurs that have ideas, whether they're in India, whether they're in Ghana, whether they're in Europe, to access ARM technology at a relatively inexpensive way. But it's this idea of creating ecosystems. And so, we spend a lot of our time, whether it's a university program, whether it's startup programs, and we're doing the best that we can to make sure that technology is accessible. But, you've got to start to think about, in this world of data centers, in this world of on-device AI, you've got to start to think deeply around your own private data. Countries need to think about sovereignty and making sure that they have the capabilities to keep data in-house, to keep critical systems that they care about within their borders. And so that is an important part. And therefore, ARM makes technology accessible, and ARM makes technology available deep and wide. Governments have a role to play. And from a UK perspective, from a European perspective, I think we're doing all the right things. Right? We are injecting capital where it's needed. We're doing great things around, the UK semiconductor and technology sort of thinking to enable the UK and Europe to sort of control its own destiny. And so I don't have all the answers. I don't think anybody has the answers, right? But there is a willingness from the industry to make sure that technology is accessible far and wide.
Now, no one has a particularly useful crystal ball to look into the future, and maybe that's quite right. But I did say we'd get back to our children, and we're just coming towards the end of our brilliant time together, Will. But I wanted to ask you this question. So my daughter is 26. My son is 22. They read constantly about the jobs apocalypse that is approaching. I remember Elon Musk's famous quote, "Are we litter picking on the beach with a 50-foot tsunami approaching from the horizon, across the horizon?" Looking ahead as far as anyone can in this great moment of change, do you fear that there's going to be a jobs apocalypse? Or are you thinking life is going to change for sure, and what jobs will survive?
Yeah, look, it's Kamal, similar to you. My kids are not as old as yours, and my age is going to sneak out a little bit, but I got a son that's just graduated from computer science. I've got a daughter who's studying law, and she's a couple of years from graduating, and so you kind of compute the maths. It actually looks older than I thought. Yes, I'm a little bit older than perhaps some of you thought. But those conversations around the dining room table are taking place. And so I think that the younger generation perhaps are not as skeptical as some of us, because, and again, I hope my kids don't hear this, but they're used to kind of using ChatGPT to help them get the work done, right? And so for them, AI and AI systems is second nature. And so the conversation I'm having with my own children is that don't just stay with ChatGPT, but when people start talking about models, they start talking about agentic systems, you need to get comfortable with that. And I think the jobs of the future, perhaps not even of the future, the jobs of the present, are jobs where humans are working close with agentic systems. And what I mean by that is, from an ARM perspective, we're doing this already. The work involved in creating a CPU, there's a creative element that's required, but then there is still I'd say a laborious task, but a time-sucking task of building test cases, test harnesses, to make sure that the thing that you've built is fit for function. What are those areas that might be critical from a bug perspective? And so we've got agentic systems today working with humans so that the human can be more efficient. And I think jobs of the future, I believe, are going to see this hybrid of human actors working with agentic systems. And so I think those individuals, and I'm telling my kids this, those individuals that are going to thrive in the workplace of today and tomorrow are those that are not afraid of agentic systems, but can understand how to get the best out of them. So whether you're a lawyer, whether you're a plumber, whether you're an engineer, you need to get comfortable, right? And so I'm optimistic about the future, not a pessimist, not too afraid, and I'm giving that message to my kids.
So it's not going to replace us and replace us all, and we can all go and sit on the beach and just relax as agentic AI runs the world.
Yeah, I think none of us will be comfortable just sitting on beaches all day. I think as humans, we're designed to get work done, but I think we can get work done more efficiently if we embrace new technology.
Very sadly, time is up. Will, Abbey from Arm, thank you so much for joining us at South by.
Well, thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you. Thank you. Your pleasure. Thank you.